Well, I'm going to be talking about consonance and dissonance and tonality and atonality. Well, let's start off with consonance. Consonance generally refers to putting notes together that I think ultimately we have a familiarity with. These are major or minor triads. And dissonance would be putting notes together that we might generally assume, and I would argue that this is the case, but we would generally assume are close together and tend to clash. Now, you can write with dissonance in a key, and that brings us on to the question of whether we're writing tonal music, modal music, because scales are modes, and the major and minor are two scales in a whole series of modes. We could write whatever mode we like. Modes basically are a series of intervals, and these constitute intervals of seconds and thirds in varying degrees, so we can get jumps between that, not necessarily moving by step. We could get a minor third movement. Or we can write without keys. We can write what we call atonal music, and then composers have found mechanisms to make that coherent. But of course, we are living in the 21st century, so we don't operate by candlelight, we don't travel from place to place by horse and carriage. We use the metro systems, we have aeroplanes that take us from place to place, and you can soon go on holiday to the moon, I think. So we do need to bear in mind that actual fact, we can move away from tonality. But when you're writing for the voice, you have to remember that you have to find the note physically from here. You have nothing to help you. You have no piano to give you a key. So you've got to bear that in mind. And the fact is that those singers who are trained in the Western musical language are familiar with the scales and systems according to the Western musical language. They would find it very difficult to use perhaps the Indonesian scales because those are going away and the temperaments are different. But bearing that in mind, as long as you work sensibly, you can achieve really very interesting results and imaginative results. But let's think of a simple thing that combines atonality and what we might call dissonance, and that's what we call a cluster chord. And a cluster chord, let me put a chord there of the tonic, the mediant, the dominant, and the tonic, okay? The root. And then we put another series of notes in between there, and they will create a cluster, okay? Now, asking your singers to suddenly come in on that is going to be very difficult. But if you asked your singers to come in one by one and move from there to there, and then move from there to there, and gradually build towards that, then of course you can create an extremely vibrant cluster chord. Ligeti would do that. And that's why Ligeti's music vocally is much easier. But there is a section in the St. Luke Passion of Krzysztof Penderecki where the voices have to come in on a whole mass of different notes. And to get your singers to do that requires not only considerable amount of rehearsal, but it means that they've got to have the ears that they can actually pick those notes out of thin air. So it's vital when you're writing for the human voice that you bear that in mind. But I certainly don't think you should compromise your musical language and step back in time.